Well, for more on this, Tom O'Connor joins us now from New York. He's a deputy editor of national security and foreign policy at Newsweek. Good to have you back with us, Tom. We know the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is proving to be quite persuasive because, as we heard there from our correspondent, initially the US was reluctant to send its HIMARS and the Patriot defense missile system, its advanced Abrams tanks, but now it's agreed to send all of those. Do you believe that Volodymyr Zelensky might be able to persuade the US and perhaps other NATO allies to send F-16s?
Well, it's difficult to say, but I'm certainly not surprised at President Biden's refusal in the beginning of this process. But as you noted, there has been a sort of trend that's developed where US officials and European officials, first they say no, then they debate it over time, they go back and forth, and eventually they concede and say, okay, we will send that equipment. Now, it should be noted, of course, fighter jets would be a significant escalation of Western aid to Ukraine. This would mark a totally new front of this sort of level of assistance that we're seeing. But we're not clear where the line is, if there is a line. And I'm not sure 100% whether the West or these European capitals or Washington knows where that line is, because it's them, it's US officials, European officials who have come out first and made the arguments against sending this equipment only to later send it. So where that line is and whether they've determined where that line is or they're sort of coming up with it as they go along is something I think that it certainly raises questions.
From Ukraine's point of view, it argues that it needs to bolster its defences now, especially because of this rumoured spring offensive that Moscow could be launching after the winter. Do you believe that is a good case to make and that perhaps Russia is in fact organising another assault that will happen in the spring?
Well, it certainly stands to reason that Russia has been mustering its forces, looking to make some sort of progress. We've seen some very limited progress, particularly by the Wagner Group on the Bakhmut front, but nothing that would indicate a decisive victory for either side of this conflict. So it does stand to reason that Russia would want to make some sort of push, especially in springtime. Now, I think that when it comes to whether this equipment will make a difference on the battlefield, really is determined by when that equipment arrives. For the Abrams, for example, there's speculation that might not arrive for till the end of the year. U.S. officials have told us at least it's a matter of months, not weeks. So it's not something that we expect to make an immediate difference in the battlefield. Other European tanks, it might be a different story. As for fighter jets, there's training involved, there's supplies, there's maintenance. There's a whole logistical issue that comes with these sort of advanced levels of equipment that Ukraine is receiving. So I'm not certain that it would even come in time to make an immediate difference on the battlefield. That being said, certainly it could come into Russia's sort of calculus as to whether these jets are coming and help determine when Russia would want to strike.
So with this steady stream of advanced Western weapons into Ukraine, how does that compare with Russia's arsenal? Is Ukraine currently outgunning the Russian defense force?
Well, there has been a lot of reports out there speculating as to whether Russia is running out of equipment. We're hearing reports, especially from U.S. officials, talking about Russia reaching out to Iran, of course. We've seen that in the form of the loitering munitions or kamikaze drones, they're often called. We've heard reports of North Korea supplying ammunition, rockets, perhaps even systems to the Wagner Group. So we know that Russia is potentially looking at partners to be able to sustain this war effort. That being said, Russia, of course, still has its own national military industry. It is able to manufacture significant amount of weapons, even cut off from sanctions. And a lot of those sanctions, we've not seen the most stringent effects of them quite yet. So Russia is still able to mount these sort of offensive. As to the more sophisticated weapon systems, whether those sanctions will restrict Russia's ability to acquire certain levels of chips or other things that are needed to manufacture more advanced and sophisticated levels of equipment and weapons, we've not seen that yet, but it's something that could be seen. But of course, I think that Russia is still trying to gain the upper ground here and be able to gain the sort of momentum to decide this war, because right now it's been very much locked in a sort of stalemate. And time is not on either country's sides, but it's certainly not on Ukraine's side, as it's still relying on an exorbitant amount of Western support right now, where Russia is still certainly able to sustain itself, at least at this stage in the war.
Okay, Tom O'Connor, we'll have to leave it there, but great to get your analysis as always. Thank you.
Thank you.